yes, that was horrible. I mean, it's hitting a nerve, and he has the one between his, through his two legs, hitting those nerves there. And that's horrible. But the process with which you go through is what's so bad, because when you hang forward, you can't breathe.
So you're actually saying there's a possibility you can suffocate.
Yeah, asphyxia, I believe, is the term. So you are hanging down and you can't breathe, and your lungs begin to fill with fluid. And so in struggling to breathe, you literally, I mean, I can't even do it, because you have to have they say that in most cases, most of the historians agree, your shoulders are dislocated almost immediately when this occurs.
Wow.
So you're hanging, and you literally have to pull yourself up on dislocated shoulders and on the nails.
Yeah.
Pull yourself up on both your hands and your feet in order to take a breath.
Yeah.
But you can only do that for so long. I mean, that would be incredibly painful.
Yeah.
And then you'll fall back down, and then there you are again. You can't breathe, and it's a battle. It's a battle between the two pains, if you will. And you have to breathe, so you pull yourself up, but at the same time, you can't do that for a long period of time. And most people actually, that's how you die is from asphyxia. You can't breathe anymore.
And also a tremendous amount of blood loss too.
A tremendous amount of blood loss. You are correct. And thinking about Jesus, you're talking about the flogging. One of the accounts that I read said that when they flogged him, they were using the Roman cat of nine tails or whatever they used there. It was those pieces of leather, and they would put these big metal, I think you said this, the big lead balls in there.
It'd be lead
They
ball.
would also put shards of glass.
Sure, glass, bone, metal.
It's horrible. I mean, one of the historical accounts that I read said that literally afterward you could see spine and backbone.
Right.
And one of the accounts said that you could see a man's bowels afterward. I mean, I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah.
So just imagine going through that, and then we're going to put something on your shoulders and make you carry it.
Sure. And keep in mind, besides the physical pain, that he also took the entire sin of the world upon him. So this must have been excruciating.
I think he knew that was coming, and that's part of that stress that he was suffering in the garden that had him sweating blood. I mean, but now it's actually occurring, and here he is going through all this. I mean, we talked about this earlier, but the word excruciating, I can say this literally. That was some excruciating pain he was going through, and the word there is actually out of the cross. It's a Latin word for the cross was such a painful experience. They actually had to create a word for it. They had to say. This out of the cross pain. This is an incredible pain, and so excruciating literally came from the type of suffering that Jesus went through, which is just amazing to me.
Right. Also keep in mind that majority of the people that were executed were naked, and also it was permanently denied a lot of them not to be buried. Now Jesus actually was buried, and he was buried in a rich man's tomb.
Right.
Now the next thing I want to get to. Christ died for us. He died on the cross. He shed his blood. He died an excruciating death. Now, that's part one of the cross. Part two was there a resurrection?
Absolutely, and you're going to hear a lot of people who will give you arguments on why there was no resurrection. Normally, they're atheists or people who just want to try to argue against that because it's not medically possible. I mean, medically. Possible. Let me stress, it's not medically possible. Is it miraculously possible? Yes, and the evidence points to that. Both the historical accounts that we have, as in the scripture here, gives us a lot. And this is one of the most historical books ever written. Archaeologists have been using this for years to find places that they're looking for, and every time that they think that it's wrong, it ends up being right. It's amazing. But what's even more is that one of the common arguments against the resurrection is they call it the swoon theory. They believe that Jesus on this cross, Stephen, just passed out. He just passed out, and so then when you have the spear going into his side and all that, he was just swooning, and then they took him down and they took him someplace else and they revived him.
Okay.
And they put someone else's body in the tomb temporarily and went through this big elaborate hoax. Is what they believe. There's several things that just don't work with that, but I'm going to use just one.
Sure.
We've just told you everything he went through on the cross and beforehand. Do you think anyone's going to live through that? I mean, some of the accounts that I've been able to read actually say that the flogging was enough to kill most men.
Right.
Okay? So, I mean, if most people are dying from the flogging, then you got to get him up there and you got to do the crucifixion and everything else that he went through. No, he died, guys. I mean, he didn't swoon from that and get resuscitated. Medical care back then was nothing like what we have today. I don't think medical care today could resuscitate someone from that type of that type of situation. So it just doesn't make any sense. The other main argument against why it was a fake, why it was a hoax, what happened is that the body was kidnapped. That someone simply went in and kidnapped the body and took it away.
Well, the Jews, or the maybe Sanhedrin, said that the body was kidnapped by the disciples.
I'm so glad you said that, because they're the ones who started this whole thing, and it's still running rampant today, which
Right.
just cracks me up.
Yeah.
But the real fact is, if this was an elaborate hoax, Stephen, and there's a lot of points that we could bring up. I'll just bring up a few minor points just to give you some ideas. First of all, we have the historical text that says that yes, the Sanhedrin at the time was using that excuse and faked it on purpose. But second of all, if you're going to build an elaborate hoax, Stephen, if you and I are going to sit down and come up with a plan on how to fool people, okay? At this time, one of the first things we're not going to do is use women.
Okay.
Okay? I mean, as much as we all love women, and I'm married and you're married, and women are wonderful, and I'm glad that they're here.
Right.
At this time, though, they did not merit any high position in a courtroom.
Right.
So if you're trying to build up an elaborate hoax, their testimony is inadmissible in a court of law. Why would you ever have women be the first ones to see him? Because it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't work at all. If you're going to build up a hoax, you're going to make sure that it happens right where somebody major can see it and where they can testify to it. But the first people who see Jesus alive and realize that the tomb is empty are women. So no one's going to build a hoax around that. That's the first point. And the second point I want to bring up is, if these people built up a hoax, would they have died for it?
Yeah.
No. I mean, you've got Peter and Stephen and all these martyrs throughout history who have died.
Yeah.
And these are some of these people that we're talking about right now actually would have known if it was a hoax. I mean, these would have been the key people orchestrating the hoax. They're not going to die for a hoax, man.
And Paul said if the resurrection did not happen, that our preaching Christ is in vain.
Right. And it's not in vain. I mean, we see lives changed, and we see the Lord working in people's lives every day. I mean, it's amazing how we see that. So that's just 2 points in that, and I know that there are other arguments against that. There's even a twin theory out there. Some people believe that Jesus had a twin brother, but that's a whole nother story. It's pretty amazing. Very creative, though. I'm impressed with their imagination. That's good. I give them an A for effort, Stephen.
I never heard that one.
It's pretty interesting.
Well, Christ was crucified and he is resurrected. Now, say Christ didn't resurrect, then this preaching right here, like I said before, all the people that have died, there's no hope. There's no hope of eternity. There's no hope of sins being forgiven. There's even coming down to prophecy. It affects prophecy.
Right.
Then all that Christ did on the cross, if there was no resurrection, was for nothing.
Absolutely nothing. But we know that that's not true. I mean, we know that it wasn't in vain, and that this preaching isn't in vain, because, I mean, Stephen, think about the people that you know whose lives have been turned around radically.
Sure.
I mean, who have been sitting there in their own death and sin and lost and going to a devil's hell because they have not heard the truth. But once that truth is heard, once that gospel is heard, that mystery of the gospel, this mystery that someone would go die for you. I mean, Jesus said it's one thing for someone to die for a friend, but go die for your enemy, because we are enemies of Christ when we live in our sin, and yet He's willing to die for us. And once that creeps into a person's life, it changes them radically.
Right.
Radically.
Right. Well, Jesus said on the cross, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And He died for you. He died for your future sins, your past sins, and your current sins. Everything was washed away by the blood of the Lamb. He destroyed the works of the devil. He made a way for all of mankind at the cross. Now, when we talked about the temple on our other show, Jesus was actually at